Thanks to Fox propagandist Sean Hannity and the cowardice of about 10 to 20 allegedly moderate House Republicans, we may very well be in the one timeline in the multiverse in which MAGA cultist Jim Jordan becomes the next Speaker of the House. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, I want to play a clip here in just a second, and then we're going to unpack several sources. But just as a recap, here's the situation. As Israel wages its war against the terrorist organization Hamas, as Russia continues its invasion against Ukraine, as Donald Trump, continues to strive for the presidency and to try to unleash authoritarian rule on the United States, the House of Representatives is paralyzed thanks exclusively to the chaos and incompetence and stupidity of House Republicans. On October 3rd, they kicked Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership, but he was a loser and a liar and a Brinkman and a bad faith actor, so good riddance, and Democrats had no obligation to protect him. We'll probably do a video about that as well. Then after about a week of floundering, they tried to designate Steve Scalise, who was McCarthy's number 2, to take his place as the Speaker of the House. And he won the vote internally, but didn't have the numbers to secure a full House vote against the Democrats. So the next day, the very next day, he dropped out of the race, which then paved the way for Trump-endorsed Jim Jordan, who, as we've discussed, is literally the least effective legislator in Congress. He is a culture warrior who spends more time on Fox News and ranting about conspiracy theories and trying to aid Donald Trump in election theft and all of that. Well, he's apparently the man for the job, and he's getting assistance from Fox propagandist Sean Hannity. Now, to give you Sean Hannity's perspective on what it means for Republican leadership, I just want to play a quick clip here.
But I will say this. The People's House needs to be reopened. And these Band-Aid solution ideas or doing a deal with the Democrats, that is not acceptable leadership from the Republican Party. I know the majority is small, but as far as I'm concerned, Jim Jordan right now has a significant majority of the votes. It is time to elect him Speaker and open the People's House.
So just to catch that, Jim Jordan has a majority of the Republican conference, but not a majority of House votes. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to be whipping votes on behalf of Jim Jordan. We'll get to that in just a second. Jim Jordan has a plurality of House votes total, a majority of the House conference. And rather than work bipartisanly with Democrats, Sean Hannity says that's unacceptable, which I just want, if you're a centrist or if you're an independent, for somebody who's on the fence, I want you to take note of that. The right doesn't believe in bipartisanship. The right wants Democrats to work with them, right? They believe in bipartisanship when the burden is on Democrats. But otherwise, just bipartisanship is a value. It's not something they believe in. And as my friend Luke Beasley pointed out on Twitter, bipartisanship is inherently reciprocal. You can't have bipartisanship if one of the two parties in question doesn't believe in it. So if we're going to expect bipartisanship, then you and I and everybody else need to be pointing the fingers at Republicans. Republicans, you need to step up. You need to be bipartisan, not just Democrats. But people like Sean Hannity completely rule it out. And the consequence of that is that Sean Hannity is effectively whipping votes on behalf of Jim Jordan, right? Because right now, Jim Jordan doesn't have the votes necessary to become the Speaker. So even external pressure from Sean Hannity, who's, by the way, a Trump loyalist, a Trump servant, just like Jim Jordan is, he and his staff have been sending emails out to alleged defectors, alleged members of the Republican resistance, about 10 to 20 Republicans who say they don't want Jim Jordan to be Speaker. Moderates are growing increasingly irritated with the tactics Jordan allies are using to pressure them into voting for him, with one member noting that Hannity has gotten involved with the effort, sending potential defectors the email below. One lawmaker said the push is counterproductive to swaying Jordan skeptics. We'll get to that in a second. Hello, Stephanie from, this is the email. Hello, Stephanie from the Hannity Show with Fox News. Sources tell Hannity that Representative blank is not supporting Jim Jordan for Speaker. Can you please let me know if this is accurate? And if true, Hannity would like to know why during a war breaking out between Israel and Hamas, with the war in Ukraine, with the wide open borders, which isn't true, with a budget that's unfinished, why would Rep X be against Representative Jim Jordan for Speaker? Please let us know when Representative X plans on opening the People's House so work can be done. Lastly, are there any conditions Representative X will choose to work with Democrats on the process of electing a new Speaker? The deadline for comment is 11 a.m. ET, tomorrow, 10/16. Thank you. So pretty incendiary, pretty pointed, pretty bullying emails, okay? This is what Jim Jordan's doing. While House Republicans basically went into recess again over the weekend, Jim Jordan was putting on his pressure campaign, including one-on-one meetings and then this external effort from his ally, Sean Hannity. I don't know to what extent Hannity's bullying has been effective, but I will say, Jim Jordan was looking at 10 to 20 no votes as of yesterday, Sunday. But as of this morning, that number is effectively, according to sources, Republican sources, according to the news like Axios, now that number is down to 7. So he's potentially cleaned house with up to potentially 13 converts, okay? So Representative Ann Wagner came out in support of Jordan. Let me be clear. I am not and will not work with Democrats as our Republican conference comes together to elect a conservative Speaker of the House. Too much is at stake to hand control of the House over to radical liberal Democrats, which is why we must elect a conservative as the next Speaker. Throughout my time in Congress, I've always been a team player and supported our Republican nominees. Jim Jordan and I spoke at length, blah, 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 blah. Jim Jordan is our conference nominee, and I will support his nomination for Speaker of the House. Meanwhile, a couple of days before that, that same woman, Ann Wagner, when asked if she would vote for Jim Jordan, absolutely not, is what she said at the time. So in just a few days, she completely reversed course, and she's not alone. Mike Rogers from Alabama did the same thing. He was also a no vote, and he said after meeting with Jordan, he would vote for him as well. So something's working. But again, I want you to take note. Let me be clear. I am not and will not work with Democrats, okay? What I find so funny about that is you have Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, saying, okay, well, let's just do something bipartisan. Let's build a coalition government. Obviously, as much as I would love Hakeem Jeffries to not have to make a coalition deal or a bipartisan deal or to placate conservatives at all because the conservative agenda is terrible, he's at least willing to work with conservatives to end the chaos in the House. Ann Wagner basically said, listen, Jim Jordan, I will absolutely not vote for him. He's unfit. No way am I going to vote for him. But actually, I would much rather vote for him than work with any Democrat. And when you put words like this in conjunction with what Sean Hannity said, it makes it abundantly clear. The Republican Party is not interested in bipartisanship for anything. They're just not. This is part of the reason why Kevin McCarthy, even though, again, he was a Brinkman, a liar, a bad faith actor, that was one of the reasons why people like Matt Gaetz wanted to kick him out, because he was seen as too comfy working with Democrats, even though Democrats would be like, nah, not really, you know. This is where we are. Bipartisanship, in my opinion, is value neutral. You can use bipartisanship to come up with good legislation, or you can have bipartisanly bad ideas. It's value neutral. It's all about really what the ends are, what the legislation is, what the policy is. But to Republicans, it's completely out of the question. They would rather, at a critical time, again, as we're heading towards another unnecessary and costly government shutdown, again, as Israel is engaging in the war against Hamas, in which Palestinian and Israeli civilians are dying in droves, as Russia continues to wage its war of conquest against Ukraine, and all these things, Republicans would rather keep the House paralyzed and just hold their nose and work for someone as odious as Jim Jordan, who, by the way, has been credibly accused of covering up sexual abuse during his time as an assistant coach at Ohio State, an assistant wrestling coach, somebody who actively aided and abetted Donald Trump's attempts to steal the 2020 election. And you have 18 vulnerable House Republicans who were elected in districts that also worked or voted for President Biden. But even the calculus is so strange. That's how radical the GOP is, that even these alleged moderates who probably really don't like Jim Jordan are so afraid of him and are so afraid of the far right flank that they're just going to roll over. Jasmine Crockett, who's one of my favorite freshman Democrats, she said, when free will isn't an option, just use faux news to force them into submission. Only in the GOP can you possibly be a top lawmaker in the U.S. House with allegations regarding children, an insurrectionist, and never have passed a bill in your entire 16 years in Congress, and this is referring to Jim Jordan, and they were worried affirmative action ushered in mediocrity. She's right. We did this story on Luke Beasley's website where I go into it, how Jim Jordan, despite being in Congress for 16 years, is literally the least effective congressman, the least effective legislator in Congress. He's infinitely more concerned with showing up on Fox News and peddling conspiracy theories. And they want to reward him with the highest position in Congress? What an indictment of the GOP. And the GOP really didn't need any additional indictments, both figuratively and legally. Jared Moskowitz, another great Democratic freshman, says, as usual, the moderates roll over. The Freedom Caucus is the only one with testicles. Freedom Caucus has threatened to primary all these people, and they are all caving. Folks, this is where we are. It's disgusting that the GOP doesn't have any backbone in this respect, and they need to be punished for it at the ballot box. If you're an independent or you're centrist, or you know someone who is an independent or a centrist, they need to be aware of this, or you need to be aware of this, because Republicans are not just going to magically come to an epiphany. They need to be incentivized to do it. The reason these moderates who don't like Jordan are folding is because they've been incentivized to fold, even if they'd rather not. They fear the consequences. So let's make them fear the consequences of supporting somebody like Jordan by saying, basically, if you do this, you will lose your majority in the next election. You will be punished by being punted back into the minority in 2024. And then Democrats get to make free reign. And by the way, we should also point out that if Democrats do reclaim the majority, if you do this, then we're going to be less inclined to be bipartisan and civil. We're just going to do whatever we want and not care about what you want, just the way you're trying to be with us. We need to make them fear the political consequences, the electoral consequences of supporting somebody as wretched as Jim Jordan. So think about it. Let me know what you think in the comments.